Hey everyone, welcome to today's D5 Render webinar. We're excited to bring you our D5 Live critique session with one of the leading voices in the ArcViz industry. Our guest today is Andy Christoforou. Andy leads the visualization and AI efforts at KPF and brings over 15 years of experience in architecture and 3D visualization. Over his career, he has taught more than 15,000 students, spoken at the top industry events like Autodesk University and NVIDIA's GTC, and shares powerful real-time rendering workflows on his YouTube channel. He's also the founder of ArcViz Academy, a learning platform that helps designers master visualization and AI tools. Today, Andy will take us through a real-time project. In just 20 minutes, he'll show you how a few adjustments can quickly elevate a scene and achieve a more photorealistic result. After which, we'll wrap up the session with a live Q&A. So stick around and get your questions answered directly by Andy. So with that, let's get started, and please join me in welcoming Andy.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me, Jeff. Great introduction. All right, so going to present, share screen. Awesome. All right, hey everybody. So for those that don't know me, my name is Andy Christoforou. I lead the visualization and AI efforts at KPF, one of the largest architecture firms in the world. And as of almost 10 months ago, I've been running this YouTube channel at Andy Christoforou, where I cover everything related to D5 render, literally everything, workflows, features, tools, you name it. There's a video for everything. And then recently, because people are interested in learning a little bit more, getting more, structured tutorials, we launched the ArcViz 3D Academy. .com/pro, and this is basically all my knowledge, 15 years in a structured course. So if you like, my teaching style and you want to join the community and learn more about, ArcViz and D5, well, this is the place for that. So let's get right into it. So today's webinar is all about optimizing a D5 project. So you guys submitted over 1,000 different renderings and projects, and I went through them, and this is actually the project that we chose, that we're going to hop into the D5 file, and I'm going to show you how to improve it. This was the starting image, okay? I'm going to show you the output in just a moment. But we've got this for about 15, 20 minutes. I'm going to do a breakdown of the renders that I'm going to show you in a second, as well as individually critiquing 6 renderings that I thought were really good, that kind of cover the gamut of materials, models, lighting, composition, and storytelling that could be improved. Because the idea of doing these live crits is it's very rare for someone to be dealing with something that just affects them. I've learned, from teaching so much, that an issue someone's facing, a lot of people are actually facing the same thing. So that's why it's really good to just listen in on these crits, see what I pick up on. And then in architecture school, we always did crits. This was the best way to get feedback, because in the real world, you only get feedback from your boss and your client, and that's too late. You don't want that. That could be a little embarrassing if your rendering doesn't look good, and you're getting pooped on. So this is my effort to give something back to the community and show you guys kind of how I work. So anyways, this is our starting rendering. This is from Oren. I thought it was a great project. It had great bones, and the second I saw it, I was like, I can run with this. I've got some really good ideas. So check this out. This is where I ended up. I generated a bunch of renderings, but I loved the starting look and feel of it, but I felt like it needed a bunch more. So I've got some more images, different perspectives, different times of days. We've got some nighttime, daytime, at dusk. And I'm going to kind of, break it down, show you what the difference is between the before and the after. Because there's actually a lot of steps, and I feel like most people don't realize what actually comes or goes into a final image. So having said all that, let me just hop into the comments, see if anyone's saying anything. All right, we got a bunch of let's goes. Good. That's what I want to hear. So I'm in D5 right now. This is the project that was given to me. So this is kind of like where it started out, give or take, and using scenes and scene groups, brand new feature in 2.11, little plug there. So this is a fantastic way to organize your project. So I'm actually going to go through this and show you all the different steps. So make note of this. This will, of course, be recorded, but I think it's really important if you follow this kind of workflow, because I do it on every single project. So thought this was great, but it was missing, some life to it. So a lot of the work here is going to adding more information. So that's adding ivy, that's adding trees and everything. Just a first pass to add some vegetation, because before, kind of plain, adding vegetation, okay, now it looks a little bit more lived in. So just to fly in a little bit, you can see what's going on. We've got some trees placed here. Nothing too crazy. We're just blocking out the scene, adding ivy to just add some more, realism to the scene. So then the next step that we wanted to do was add some details. So this was the before and this was the after. So I keep saying lived in, and one of the reasons I chose this project and started doing this workflow is the project reminded me of a building that was going up in my neighborhood about like 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like in the center of the city. Like, it's going to be so busy. It's going to be a beautiful place to live. And I feel like it's going to help activate the streetscape. And that's exactly what I wanted to do with this project. I felt like there's going to be a lot of life around this. So as you can see here, we added some benches, some street lamps, all these little details, right? All this is important. And lastly, some puddles. And these puddles are actually coming from the precipitation slider right here. You can drive how much. So we have this around 50. This is going to help give us some reflections here. Add some like a little bit of, breaking up these like perfect textures, because in the real world, nothing is like perfectly clean and everything. So we want to make sure we're just layering on and on and on. The other thing we added were these basically like these small little planters. And this comes directly from the D5 library. So we'll do a before and an after. Just adding that, places for people to sit, for the trees. That way it doesn't look like it's floating is huge. Because without the details, there's like no connection to the sidewalk. Like, it just looks fake. And that's the biggest thing that people struggle with in the world of like CGI and ArcViz. There's these little tells that can, completely ruin the image, make it look fake. So it's important we kind of mimic the real world. I know there's never going to be a tree growing directly out of the sidewalk. It's going to have, some sort of flower bed, right? So we've got our details there. Then we were thinking about the lighting and the time of day. And the original image was kind of like a dusk scene. And right now it's kind of dark in the apartments. But in the real world, we'd have some people that are still there. The lights are on or lights are off. And so we layered in a parallax layer. So these parallaxes, let me just turn off the actual model or the architecture. And this is why you use layers. Layers are very important. I can easily turn off the architecture. And from here, I can actually target each of these parallax interiors. And if you've never played with these are amazing. If you notice, as I move the camera around, it's like I see more or less of the room. And each of these interiors have lighting scenarios. So you can boost the lighting, you can darken it, you can play with the intensity of artificial lights and everything, and the color. Because in the real world, you're going to have, one apartment with 10 lights on, another apartment with 2 lights on, another apartment with 0 lights on, or maybe they've got warm bulbs, the other one's got cold bulbs, So you're going to see that kind of variety. So that's why it's important you do that. And the reason you do all these layers is so you could easily just pop in here and change the settings. Because if you've got the building here, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So that's why you should use layers. Okay. So let's go back to that. So now we're adding some more life. I'm going to keep saying life until it's like distilled or like ingrained in your brains that this is very important in the world of ArcViz. Then we've got cars. Okay. Because like I was saying earlier, we've got this wide street here. People are going to be coming to this area. The cars are going to help activate this. So we've dropped in some cars, didn't do anything crazy here. You could do a path if you want. And the cars can like keep whizzing by. So there's a pro and con to doing that. If you place them, they're going to stay there no matter what. If you do a path, they're always going to be moving unless you turn the speed to 0. Some people forget that. And then you basically have a car that's constantly moving when you're doing these renderings and it's not in the same spot. I usually do some sort of composite in Photoshop. So it's important that my base image is consistent throughout. So we added the cars. And we'll just do a little fly around. They're going that way, this way. And you can see like there's not much there. It's just like we're focusing on the project here. So we've got that. Then let's add the people. And the people, in my opinion, made the biggest difference. So before and after. Okay, look at this. So now we've basically activated this streetscape. We've got all these people coming by. We've got cars coming by. Like, you don't want to live like here where it's dead. You want to live somewhere like fun, especially if you're younger. Like you want to go out, you want to see people. You don't want to be, in a ghost town. And I feel like when people don't add the correct entourage to a project, it can completely like kill your image. So if the place should be public, have people. Think of like a library or a plaza. You want people. If it's like a house, I probably wouldn't put people. I found in my early days, if I put people there, the client would be like, well, this is my house. Who's that person in my house? It gets a little weird. So it needs to make sense. But here, it's a streetscape. We want to sell this lifestyle. That's the whole point of like us getting hired to do these like rendering images, which you could also think of just marketing, right? We want to try and sell this life as well as like the apartments. So we've got that. Then I noticed that our building, it's looking good with like the streets and the cars and the people and the ivy, but our context is a little bland because it's just using the city massing models, which are good for like early stage concept design. But when it comes to like photorealism, you really want like beautiful context. So what we did here, I'm going to toggle this on. We started layering buildings, and these buildings, this isn't like something I imported. This is actually straight out of the D5 library. The asset library gives you so many different assets to choose from. You could just go to, office buildings or residential buildings, and you can plop these in. You can move them. They're all here. So I'm just going to fly around, and it's all about adding, this careful layering of these buildings just to give it some context. So it's not like floating in the middle of nowhere. And then we added these little backdrop planes that you can see here. And this is to literally just block the horizon line. That's one of those giveaways that you could tell if it's a rendering. And if somebody like is new to this or really good, they always hide the horizon line because it doesn't look good. And nothing in the real world looks like that. So cover that. Context is a great way for that. So let's do a little before and after. So before and after. So look at that. So then the next thing we wanted to do is add scatter. So scatter is basically all of our vegetation. And it's not too apparent here, but over here, this is our scatter. And I've noticed recently I've got to just like click on it to reactivate it. But this is going to add life to all these paths right there. So now it doesn't look like it's empty. This is literally a one-click solution. I'm just using a template. If you don't know what that it's from, it's right here. You could just use the lawn templates with some flowers, or you could generate it with the AI agent or bot, this guy right here. So you've got a couple ways to get this in here. Like there's no reason not to have, beautiful vegetation. So we've got that. That's already looking, much more rich. And now the last thing was just like the final, the coloring, the color correction, the lighting of the scene. So I actually did like a bunch of different takes because I couldn't really decide on what one I wanted. I was playing with sunset, then I was playing with like dusk. And the fun part about all this is like you find an HDRI, it could be literally from the default library, or you plug in something into the AI atmosphere match. So if you don't know what that is, let me show you this. Right over here is AI atmosphere match. You just upload a photo, or you can use one of their templates, and it will automatically apply color correction as well as lighting. So look at some of these examples. So we've got this. This is like overcast. This is sunny. So for me to just prototype different, light setups, this is so easy. Like takes no time at all. You could see huge drastic change here. And it's like clever enough to even turn on and off specific environmental settings. So I've got this gloomy setup right here where it's actually going to turn on like weathering. So look at that. Like it detected that the source image was gloomy. And if you're wondering where these source images came from for this, I was using a mix of the reference images that D5 offers here, as well as just generating things in Midjourney. So I'd go into like Midjourney and be like, hey, give me, a gloomy streetscape rendering. And then I'd plug that in, and that's it. That's how I'm getting this. And this takes less than a minute to do. So instead of me tinkering, let's say I'm not comfortable going into the environment panel, I could just upload an image, and then I've got, these beautiful light setups. And the best part is this is all editable. Like this is using HDRI. I can rotate everything. I can rotate the sun. I could go into a custom HDRI direction. This is not like a static frozen thing. So it's okay to experiment. It's fun to experiment. And I highly recommend that you do, because when you're starting out, you're not going to know what every single slider does unless you watch my videos. A little plug there. But it's just an easy way to just start experimenting. And then if I didn't sell you on the AI atmosphere match, you do have D5 Studio as well. Under D5 Curated, these are all light setups that the D5 team has like carefully put together. You just double click them and it will load up a light scenario. So I'll give it a couple seconds and there we go. And it's the same thing. It's all editable. So I can rotate, I can play with the sun, and there I go. So there's like no excuse to have bad lighting in D5, in my opinion. There's just so many ways. So once you've done all that and you're like ready to render, some of the benefits of D5 is the AI post-processor is phenomenal. So I'm just going to show you some examples of kind of how I got here. So if I go to task, I'm going to show you a couple of these. This was my night render. And I thought it was cool, but like I wanted a little bit more flair. So again, I took an image from Midjourney and using the AI style transfer tool, I went over to realistic and I just uploaded a night image. And then I got something like this. Look at that. And I fixed, these two, glowing stars in Photoshop, but like what a difference, right? So this is just such an easy way to add all this extra detail in no time at all. And I'll show you another one. This is a day rendering. So before and then after. Look at that. And all I'm using is the style transfer here. You can use some of these defaults. These are great. I'm not saying they're not, but you could also use reference images, or don't even use a reference image. And I've been using this setting, 0.2 and 1, and I just feel like it does an amazing job. I think the data set, whatever is being used here, just makes beautiful renderings super easy. So 0.2 and 1, that's like my go-to right now, as well as uploading images. But you can see it's adding a lot of detail. So detail I want to talk about in a second is something that we were kind of doing right over here. So with the 2.11 update, let me see if I can show you. You can use the advanced brush to paint in extra details. That would be kind of annoying to do before. So we were painting in, trying to get the precipitation off. If I had one, we're painting in like leaves and things, and I think my scatter is off. Give that a second. Yeah, I'm not sure why this happens, but it might be one of these guys. Yeah, so check this out. So this is my advanced scatter, and I've got leaves and I've got pebbles. And just to turn that off for a second, you see that? That's adding detail, but that was a manual thing, and that's why I like the AI post-processor, because it can do a lot of these details for me, so I don't need to spend time painting and everything. I'm not saying like that's a big deal or anything, but it can be a time sink for some people. And I feel like in the world of architecture, if you're like a designer and you're like doing renderings for a project, you don't have that much time to just like really like delve into all the details. So it's nice to have these like little shortcuts, but it's also good to know that you can do this manually, right? And talking about details, I can't stress this enough, but the decal system, very good for just like adding simple details right here. I generally lower my opacity. They start out like this, and I do that just so it can blend. That way it doesn't look super bright. So I just go around and I blend it, as you can see here. And then all this should just be on its own layer. So before and after. So very cool. So anyways, let me show you some other renderings that we did here. We've got this guy. This was the one of the hero images, and it was the same idea. We used the style transfer, and look at that. It enhanced the ivy. It enhanced the people, right? That's a big part of this. Look at that. The vegetation, we'll do another pass. Right, where did my slider go? Look at that, before and after. So it's like, why not use it? Like it's such a game changer. And I'll go over one more. And then this was the corner shot, which I thought by default was great, but the AI style transfer, like look at that, huge difference. So that in a nutshell is like how I approach a project. So it's like, once you get the basic materials in, then you just start layering in all this information. So I'm going to run through it real quick, and then we'll start reviewing the other images, and I'll look at the comments real quick. But starting point, vegetation, thinking about the little details, the precipitation, the bench, the lights, the planters, adding in parallax, adding in cars, adding in people, context, scatter as needed, and then playing with the lighting, and just always just hit new scene, play with the lighting, group it in a new scene group, have fun with it. Like this in my opinion is the fun part of doing ArcViz, especially with D5. Like it's so simple. So it's great. So I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm going to switch over to the comments just to see if anything's been coming through. Stunning. Okay. How do you place ivy on the balconies? So the ivy, so you actually have a couple ways. This is actually all groups, but you could do it manually, or you could use the nature path to drop these, or the custom path to drop them along. We're trying to be a little perfectionist here, so we were going one by one. But if the project were any larger, I would definitely try and do it with the path tool, just to kind of automate some things. But it wasn't that bad, and you can always copy these. One tip I'll give people is, like, the difference between this and this is there's actually not much of a difference. It's literally just moved up. It's copied, moved up, and then just moved over, and like you really can't tell the difference. If I were a smarter man, what I would do is I would actually click one of these and I would replace from assets, and I can actually just find like another Ivy asset, and that would drop right in. So like I could grab something like this, and let's just say for the sake of this will replace. So that was easy. So start with the copying. So make your group, copy over, and then just replace assets. Like that's an easy win, in my opinion. Okay, cool. All right. Would you please explain one? Okay. I think before adding vegetation, must adding environment. Am I right? So lighting. Okay. This is what I usually do with lighting. I feel like it can go both ways. In general, I think step one, have light on your building. Okay. That way you can work and you don't work in the dark. Okay. Your final light settings, I don't think you can do unless you see all the materials and all the entourage and the vegetation all come together. Like I wouldn't be able to do my final lighting pass at this step. Okay. Like I basically applied everything, and then that's when I started flying around and playing with all these light settings because I had everything there. You really want the complete picture. That way it's so much easier to see how things impact. And when I use the word impact, this is what I mean. Think about it. I've got context buildings and I've got trees. So I've got essentially like light obstructions. So when I use my azimuth to rotate, some of the things that are being, or blocking the sun are coming from the assets I applied, right? So I have two buildings that are actually blocking the sun, giving me this little valley of light. If I did this before I did all that layering, I wouldn't actually know how it's going to impact the final. So that's why I do my final lighting pass and like my storytelling pass at the end. Okay. So start with your model, get that in, your materials and everything, then work your way up into lighting, composition, and the storytelling. So I'll take one more question before I hop in. So GPU or RAM? So GPU, very, very important. I'm using a 5080, so you could see like it's a pretty hefty file. I've maxed out my VRAM, and then that overflows into RAM. They actually go hand in hand. So the more RAM you have, the better. I would not use any real-time rendering software with less than 32 gigs, just based on the project size that I work on. 64 gig is like phenomenal. If you want to go higher than that, be my guest. But that's what happens when VRAM is full. Your RAM does kick in, and then obviously you have all these phenomenal like frame gen settings that uses DLSS4 to boost your frame rate. So I'm getting like 75 frames per second on a very heavy scene, which I wouldn't be able to do before. So yeah, that's all super important. But yeah, agreed. Dynamic Render Labs RAM will crash if you run out. All right, cool. And then a great question: would you suggest covering distant buildings with fog? So I actually have a whole nother one for fog. Here's my thought on fog. So before and after. Fog is really great at giving you basically contrast between your foreground, midground, and background. So I didn't want these buildings, these context buildings, to be the focus of my project, right? So a little bit of fog hides them in a little bit. And you can think of this as like a cheap way to avoid Photoshop. So you don't need to like do any post. You can actually put a little bit of fog. Like you could see here on my lower fog settings, like it's not that much. It's very subtle. I could probably get away with something like this just a little bit. I would actually recommend that in most cases, and I'd always recommend having depth of field on, so that way your foreground elements are always blurred and your background are also kind of blurred as well. And this is in focus, because this is all about focus, like, eyes on the project. All right, so let's see. Where and how do you get houses nearby? Okay, so where do I get the houses nearby? So check this out. So this guy, all these contexts, this is coming directly from the D5 library. I feel like D5 has the best library, especially with like the addition of all like the furniture pieces and everything. But if you go to outdoor buildings, this is literally what we're using. So if you don't believe me, what is it? Modern Merchant 1 apartment, or I'll just type in apartment. Yeah, there you go. Modern Merchant 1 apartment. So this is all the D5 library. I didn't like import anything from like SketchUp or Max. This is like 100%. What you see here is like from D5, except for the actual architecture of the project. And then just to, zoom out so you could see what this whole thing is. And this is what I meant about the sun before, if you didn't really understand why I was saying do your lighting after. But this is the whole project. Like, it doesn't look like much from here. This is all like fake context buildings, applied on top of the massings from the city. So you could see like we had a massing here and we just covered it. That's it. It's like we kind of had an idea of where buildings are. So we just used massing from the city tool, this guy right here, to do that. And then like even the water, like I just cheaped out and I put a plane with water, and then D5 did its good old magic. And look at that. It like added like benches and it made it like look like a port and everything. And then it added a street on the other side of the river. Like, that's insane. So that's why this tool is incredible. So I'll take one more question. I'm so glad you guys are engaged. How to improve camera angle? Camera angle is a great one. So composition like that, yeah, that is such a huge one. So in my professional opinion, I recommend just taking more photos in life. I think it's great practice for you to like understand what's interesting. And then I also recommend that you learn the different types of composition. So like rule of thirds, symmetry, balance, negative space, all that, very, very important. And I feel like it's like a lost art now. If you're struggling with like understanding grids and everything, you can toggle on the rule of thirds grid. So all you need to do, like for stupid, easy, beautiful photography, is lock your bottom line with the horizon. So something like this, and then lock one of the intersection points. Doesn't need to be both, with something interesting. So it could be like, I could lock it with that. And now I've got a nice little frame here. I'd probably play with the cropping of my image just so it's like this box. And like, that's a nice, beautifully centered project. But you always want to have some sort of, again, with the rule of thirds, basically break it up this way. This is how I do it. Top third should have sky. It's okay to have sky. It drives me nuts when people do something like this and there's no sky. It's okay to breathe. It's okay to have space. Think of like when you're doing boards in architecture school. You don't want it all covered with drawings and everything. Like humans, although we're like very smart, like we can't handle too much information at the same time. That's why we like negative space. So top is your sky band. Middle is like your architecture focus band. And then the bottom can either be like landscape, or it could be like context, or like street. So it's like man-made or nature, building focus, and then sky. Okay, so that's like the best way I could do it. But I definitely recommend going through like different types of composition, because that's really going to help you the most. And it's just like, it's so fun and easy to fly around, make a scene, save the scene, go back to it, edit. Like that's the fun part of this. And make sure your building's never cut off. That drives me nuts too. And then one last thing before we get into the crits is it's also okay to edit your aspect ratio. I feel like everyone does 16:9. You don't need to do 16:9 all the time. You could do 4:3. You could go vertical. that's all allowed. I feel like sometimes we just default to 16 by 9. I'm not saying it's like bad. It's just I don't know why. You can do so much more. You've got so many options there. So anyways, that's my little rant there. That it's okay to do that. Like this is what 4x3 would look like. This is what 9x16 would look like. But you do need to compensate with your focal length. Look at that. Like that's beautiful. And that you guys literally saw. It took me like 2 seconds to do this. And this was 9x16, and now I've got like cleaner bands, and I can take a step back if I want. But I'm actually going to save this scene because I really enjoy it. All right, cool. So that was part 1 of this webinar. Thank you for those. Awesome. So now let's hop over to our reviews. And then if you missed it in the beginning, this was like everything I output starting and then output. So very, very happy with this project. It was a lot of fun. All right, so now I've got 6 renderings from you guys. I got rendering from, sorry if I butcher anyone's name, Heidi, Edon, Alva, Dalipa, Cesari, and Rick. And I took these 6 images, and a bunch of you may know this, but I trained a custom GPT on everything I know about ArcViz. And what I did was I provided feedback on the rendering, and I gave it to the GPT to actually generate a revised version. So that's actually what you see at the bottom. So the stuff I talk about and I like review and I comment, that's where that output's coming from. So I'm going to go through each of these. I'm going to talk about what's working, what's not working, how I would fix it, and then you'll see the output because I think it's really interesting to see the before and the after. So anyways, this is a great image. Like the model stuff is there for the most part. You got to be careful about like this low, poly stuff when you start seeing the segmenting. Like that's not great. So you always want to make sure you've got your smoothing groups on, everything's round. Then you want to make sure your lighting, kind of makes sense with the scene. I thought, if this is like a dining hall or like a restaurant, this is like blown out in my opinion. It would be nicer if it was like a little like more moody. You go to a nice restaurant, it's a little dark. That's kind of what I pictured here. And what I was talking about earlier with the D5 demo is like this is a public place. So in my opinion, like it needs people. I feel like the people sell it. So talking about adding that and making sure all these assets aren't so like samey. Like if you pay attention to these like trees or plants, they actually look like they're the same all the way around. And that's not the perfect world. Everything's going to be rotated. Everything's going to be a different scale. So I took all that and we put it in here. And I love this image because it's like we've got food cooking, right? Like that looks awesome. We've got people walking around with some motion blur. Like it looks like it's full of life. And I love the lighting. Like it feels like a restaurant. And that, in my opinion, is how it should be. So then moving on to Edon, like again, I thought like materials and the model were totally fine. It was just like the lighting and the storytelling is what was missing. It felt a little flat in terms of like the lighting, like not enough contrast between the buildings as well as sunlight and shadow. So that was my biggest focal point. And again, this should be a public place. So it should have more people. It should have more life. So we plugged all that in and got this. And you can kind of do a before and after. You see all the people. We see all the little framing elements here, which I think are great to help vignette and focus, and all the stuff on the floor. Like we love all those details. So these little things, like this wasn't much. It's just tweaking contrast, tweaking your lighting, and adding more layers. So that's why I was showing in the D5 demo, like all the little steps that go into a final image. So this image is there. It just needs the tweaking on the lighting and everything. So then moving over to Alva here. So Alva, it was like a cool attempt at like a night rendering, but when it comes to ArcViz, you need to make sure that the language you're putting out there is consistent. So we've got this like really dark building with the lights on, right? So we've got lights on, but then over here, it looks like it's super, super bright, but then here it's like super dark. And then when I look over here, it's like, well, what is all this? Like, I don't like, it just looks like mud and flowers. So I was a little lost there. So I was putting together my thoughts and I was saying like, it's got to be darker. This should probably be a street and we should probably activate the street with, some life, some cars and everything. And that's what brought us here. So we changed the position of the camera as well, because you want to be at eye height. Like that's what humans understand. You want to have like an interesting backdrop as well. And just having, the taillight streaks adds a little bit of a realism to the world, especially like the sidewalk and the street and the decals right here. Like that's all super important. And all these like little details of the grass growing and the hills and the trees, like these are the things that matter. So that's why I was breaking it down before. Like you need all this stuff to have a beautiful image, but it's got to make sense camera wise. So I'm glad a couple of you asked about like how to position cameras. So always eye height, unless it's an aerial, of course, and unless it's like a design review and you need to literally like be 50 feet off the ground and look at the building. It's like 9 out of 10 times it should be eye level. Okay, so good job there. So then Dalipa, I thought like it was a fine composure, but I kept getting distracted by these shadows, and like I feel like it's a silly thing, but like my eye, I don't know why, it just like kept going to either the bright darkness here or the bright fog in the background. Like the materials and everything looked nice, but I wish the glass had like some reflections or something. Because if you're in a cabin, and you have all this glass, you're going to see all these beautiful trees and everything in the reflections. So we plugged all that in, and we got an image like this. So it kind of fixed this. It fixed the fog. It made it seem a little bit warmer, added some furniture, added those reflections, and it feels a little homier. Just tweaking the lighting and the saturation. Like what a difference with like the wood planks here and the fog. As well as cranking the warmth of your image as well. Like going a little bit to a warmer color, like an orange or yellow, like it makes it feel much more cozier. Like I'd rather live here. The coldness of the fog kind of makes it feel a little odd. So it's important all that kind of comes together. So then Cesare, I love this image. I thought it was great. But I had like two minor gripes. I thought the post-processing and the color correction is like, I get the vibe, I get the aesthetic and all that. But what happens when you have like white tiles with like a very white, sky, there's no contrast. And you really want a nice defining edge between, your parapet, so the top of the building, and the sky. The other thing is in terms of like the seasonality of the assets. Like she's got a hat and a sweater, this kid's got a jacket, but then this guy's in shorts, and then she's in shorts too. Like I know it's a silly thing, but like this is the stuff that like breaks the immersiveness of a rendering. But like other than that, I thought it was phenomenal. I love all the details. I love the pigeons. I love the scatter. Love the materials. It's just like a little bit of contrast I think would help a lot. So this kind of warmed it up a little bit lighting wise, but I feel like it helped add some nice contrast to like the building, the ground, and the sky. It lifted a little bit of that bleached look, where it's like super white. This gives it a little more contrast. And I say contrast a lot because like that's how humans really see. Like that's the difference between light and dark. So remember that. And then we've got Rick here. So Rick, this is one of those examples of like where you're higher up in the sky. And I just feel like it's like a good start, but like the model and the materials are kind of like hurting you. Like it doesn't feel like corrugated metal. It should look something like that. As well as like missing, grass and everything here. And generally, like I try to avoid any vehicles with color unless that's part of the focal point or like the focus of the rendering. So instead of focusing on the architecture, my eye just goes straight to the truck and this blue here. So it's actually a little distracting. And so I go there first, and then I look at like the guy, and then like, I don't know, the dog in the sad grass. So, those are the types of details we want to add, and that's going to help it feel a little bit more richer. So more materiality, more storytelling, just a little bit more can take it to the next level, which brings us somewhere here. So it's like this, the model or the geometry is helped a little bit. The cars are like neutralized in terms of color, and there's like people playing in the lawn, which I think is like a fun thing because this is all empty space. Might as well activate it. So, anyways, that was my my 6 image review and my D5 demo, which I can't believe I did it in the time frame. We actually targeted 45 minutes. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to share a screen. We'll do the Q&A, and then we're going to hang on and answer your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Jeff is going to bring up, the slides. And then, if you want to, learn more with me, scan that QR code. It's got links to my YouTube, LinkedIn, as well as the ArcViz Academy. But anyways, I'm here to answer questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. No, I thought it was really helpful, especially all the new 2.11 features you were able to use in your demo, and then how you're able to translate that into your critique, just following some simple photography basics that we all know. So thanks again for walking us through that. And yeah, as Andy mentioned, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them.
Why can't you rate our renders? What do you mean? Okay. Yeah, if there's any questions about like what I showed, we can definitely answer it here. Any technical issues, I would definitely like move to support or the Discord. All right, so Joe, you're asking, what about camera position for a long horizontal building? So for longer buildings, that's actually where you would use your 16:9, or you could override the actual pixel count, so you can go wider. That way you can fit the whole building, or if it's just not worth it and like you can't fit the building, you could do a corner angle, kind of like what I was doing in the demo, and that's how I fit those two towers into one view and made it interesting. So I would do that, but you could definitely use rule of thirds there, especially like locking your horizon with the base of the building. Okay, how to improve lighting in night views. I think the biggest thing in night is you need to have some sort of artificial lighting that can come from your parallax, that can come from artificial spotlights, disc lights, rectangular lights in your scene to light up your rooms and everything. But you want to make sure when you're doing this that like the brightest spot is your building and the context is kind of faded out. That way it doesn't take away from your focus, because if like every single building's lights are on, you kind of get lost. So that's why when we're doing the night rendering, it's like we had all the lights in our main building, and then the other ones were a little bit lighter or just not even on. I can't speak about integration between Corona materials and D5 because I don't know. Why does AI Material Snap not work well with tiles? I'm not sure about that. I was doing some tests with Material Snap last night for a new video. I don't know the answer to that situation. I've been able to get planks, bricks, and tiles to work well. I think one tip I would have is make sure your selection is like for that region, and it's a close-up. Close-ups help the most. I think this is the best software for rendering was ever made, and I love it even when I'm not doing it. Yeah, agreed. I think this is like, you guys know how I feel about D5. Yeah. Can we get a free model for render and maybe high-rise building? Oh, actually, Jackson. So I don't know if many people know, but the what do we call it? D5 scenes? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the
Scene Express.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Scene Express. Scene Express is like an amazing tool. Think of it as like the SketchUp warehouse, but for like D5 scenes. So you can like just download beautiful projects and then work off of that. So that's like a great resource, and it's a great way to do more exercises. So if you haven't checked it out, go to the D5 Scene Express. You could just Google it; it'll bring you there. But usually, what I'll do, for beginners, is we'll download a scene, and we'll just strip it to the base model, and then we'll just start layering everything. Yeah, no problem. What workflow do you suggest for 3ds Max? I mean, the plugin for D5 to 3ds Max is perfect. Like if you've got the live sync, you could definitely do that. I don't know what particular thing about the workflow, but once you get it in there, once you get into D5, I literally try to spend as little time as possible with the import. I get that in, and then we just start layering all those details like from the demo. Which one is better for exterior rendering, Twinmotion D5. I mean, I'm team D5. I think Twinmotion is still very good, but D5, I think just something about it. It clicks with my brain in terms of workflow. Do you know how to fix the real world mapping? I'm having trouble with that. Real world mapping. Like the triplanar? And then we've got a question about increasing intensity of emissive lights. So with the emissive lights, I'm trying to think of increasing. So some settings in D5 are locked by a slider, but then you can actually override them. I don't know if emissive is one of them. I think the slider maxes out as like 100, but you can actually, I think, type in like 300 or something. Surash is asking importing into D5. So with D5 imports, I feel like I always go with like the direct import instead of the live sync. Literally only because when I'm like contracted or I'm helping on a project, I'm given the files. Like I'm no longer designing. If I'm a designer or an architect, go with live sync. If you're just like doing, hey, this is a geometry freeze, this is where we're at, go with the direct import. I think both work really well. Jocko's asking, can we do more interior spaces next time? Yeah, we could definitely do interior spaces. That's totally fine. Really know when will D5 include 3D mannequins? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Jeff knows that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either what they mean by 3D mannequins, like for storefronts.
That's what I would think, right? Like, yeah. Joe's asking how to material seamless. I've tried to use the AI, but it loads a lot. I mean, you could always go the old-fashioned way with like Photoshop and clone stamping, but I haven't had any issues with the what's it called, the seamless tool yet. Can you give tips on how to make roads parking lots look more realistic? Yeah, the Warrior. I don't know if you saw my breakdown, but have decals on top, lower the opacity on them, and then do like an advanced brush of like debris. So debris being like leaves, pebbles, just like stuff. And then also add a little bit of like precipitation and like puddles to help add some like moisture on that. I notice that sharpness is a lot sometimes. I'm not sure about that because you could. Sharpness is good. I like sharpness. I mean, you could always blur it in Photoshop, but yeah, I have problems with this. Okay. Would you do more on navigation user interface for faster workflow? So my opinion on navigation, I'm team fly, not team orbit. I feel like if you want to get your camera in the best spot, I feel like fly mode makes it so much easier than orbiting, just because of like the nature of it, because you're positioning where the actual camera is when you're flying around. Orbit, you're kind of like going around a circle. Like I feel like it's indirect rather than just like directly going there. So I also have some navigation tutorials, but I do recommend fly mode. Can you add more? Yeah, it's sorry. I don't work at D5. I don't know these things. Yeah, I can answer like workflow questions. I don't know like what's on the roadmap. I don't have that kind of information. But yeah, more cars sounds good. Yeah. But I will say the D5 team, like if you do flag like assets you need, have been really, really good. Like I remember in one of the most recent updates with like all the pool people and like hospitality people, like that was I know a request we put in, and like we were happy to see that within like just like a couple weeks that the launcher was updated. So that was awesome. Is there a way to control the radius of the vehicle path? Yeah, so when you drop in a path, you can actually, it's called the width, and you can play with the width of that. And a little tip on the vehicle path that I notice a lot of beginners, when they do like a street, they'll do one path this way and another path that way. You can actually do the dual checkbox, and it'll go both ways, which is really nice. All right, so Cliff, need more tutorials on nighttime renderings? All right, I'll add that to my queue. It's always good to hear from people what they want, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know, I'm out of ideas. Do D5 have native plants? Yeah, absolutely. I can see V-Ray being replaced. Yeah, I I don't want to talk bad about any company, but I like, in my opinion, with how fast D5 is and just like the AI post processor, that quality gap that I feel like we've been hearing about, like, for the past 10 years of like real time versus, offline renders is vanishing at this point. Like, it's getting better like literally every single month when the AI tools are getting updated like that. Yeah, that's going away. Like, I'd rather have a rendering that I can generate in like 3 minutes than a rendering that's like 6 hours to generate. That's crazy. Can landscape architects fully rely on D5 plans library specifically from India? I'm not sure. You would have to check the species. Like, yeah, what you could do, because you could, if you don't have the pro sub, just go into the asset library and just search for species that are common there. You could also try asking the AI agent for species from India, and then like the conditions, if it's like high drought, low drought, or sunny, not sunny, and it can give you a an actual schedule, which is really cool. Torvik, that's really funny about you're right. Yeah, Nokia against smartphones. That's so funny. Jeff, the AI stuff is on the pro plan, right?
Yeah, I believe there will be some restrictions on the community plan. So if you want to get all of the AI features, you would have to switch over to Pro.
Right. And then you guys are giving out a free 14-day D5 Pro code. So that's, be sure to take advantage of that. I mean, the radius when turning the vehicle path, because if you turn the grip into a curve, the curve turns a bit. I'm not sure about that one, Daniel. Jeff, do you know that one?
No, maybe that's something that we need to take a look at. Maybe he's saying that the turn is a bit too sharp when it curves. So then, yeah, maybe that's something that we can take a look at.
Yeah, maybe with the smoothness, if that gets bumped up.
Yeah.
So what is a FSR frame generation? Okay, so frame generation, that in my opinion is like magic. So if you have, I think it's, what is it, 4000 series card and above, you get multi-frame generation. And basically, let's say you're getting 20 frames per second on your file. If you activate it and you have like a newer card, you can go between like 2x, 3x, and 4x your frame rate. So that 20 can jump up to 80 frames per second. And it uses AI to basically interpolate frames. I have it on all the time because like I'd rather fly around like at 100 frames per second than have it be a little choppy. So yeah, definitely have that on. The real time on Revit not works. Not sure what that means. Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
this was fun. I hope you guys learned something. Me. But yeah, this was fun. Yeah, if you guys want to do this again, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. If you think this format is fun, if it makes sense, because we're always, I feel like, looking at this stuff to see what resonates with the community.
Yeah, as Andy mentioned, thanks everyone for all the questions. They were all great. Andy, special thanks and shout out to you for making this all happen. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you all on the next webinar. So enjoy the rest of your Fridays and take care, everyone.
All right, awesome. See you, everybody. Thank you again.